Welcome again to the Virtual Executive Roundtable. And just to remind you, the roots here are that I was thinking, how can I help during this time? And I know a lot of folks are feeling disconnected from other executives. And so what if we had a forum, we could bring people together, other peer executives, where we could share perspective, either through experience or otherwise, maybe reading, learning, hearing, hey, a friend did this, what have you, sharing that perspective, sharing connection. So that might be an introduction, a resource. In fact, that happened. I just found out right before this meeting, I got a text from a friend that business is happening from a couple of people on this roundtable. So that was really cool. It was actually in the personal protection equipment, the PPE stuff, which was, would have never happened just even a couple of months ago. So anyway, that was really cool. I think they had a couple other things they were working on together also. On that note, let me know if there's anybody you aren't already connected with, you want an introduction or whatever, glad to make that for you. And the other is around encouragement. And encouragement oftentimes can take the form of just an idea, maybe just seeing someone else and say, hey, actually that gives me an idea and that inspires me and encourages me. It might be in prayer. As I mentioned, I pray for all of y'all. Before the call, if you have any specific prayer requests, let me know. I know we have all faiths represented on the roundtable, and we also have a lot of Christian believers too. And if there's anybody who wants to join me in prayer, please let me know, because I know we have some strong prayer warriors on the roundtable as well. All right, so that's it. Let me just remind you of the setup here. My animation's a little off, so there's our shining co-host, Brian Audia, who I'll introduce here momentarily. But like always, it's going to be interactive, so please interact on the chat. Get that going. That's always fun to, one thing, if there's anything that I think now realize is chat's pretty cool. I wonder if we're going to bring that back into the office when we go back into the in-person work world. If people are going to be passing notes, or what is chat going to look like in the non-work from home environment? I don't know. We'll see. But a lot of value there. So please keep the chat going. Any comments, any thoughts you want to share, maybe aren't quite to the level of you want to turn the camera on yourself. Raise your hand if you're an attendee, not a panelist. And we do have both of those categories. Is a little different than a normal Zoom. So we have panelists and attendees. Panelists, we can turn on the cameras and mics and everything. Attendees, y'all can raise your hand, ask a Q&A, and we'll circle around to you. And hopefully you can feel just as involved. And we have a hot topic. And so today's hot topic is employee engagement and culture, getting it right and wrong. And with us, we have our co-host, which is kind of our format here, Brian Audia. So I'll just introduce Brian real quickly. And then, as I mentioned, we'll do a little sort of talk show host style with Brian. Feel free to send in your questions, or toward the end, we'll open it up a little bit. You can ask some live questions, and we'll kind of pass the mic around at the very end and ask y'all to give some feedback on the topic as well. What else y'all are doing in the way of employee engagement? What an interesting topic at this time, right? So Brian, I met actually through a friend of a friend, went to one of his workshops and was really impressed. He's done a great job of taking concepts and frameworks and models and things that consultants work with a lot of times, because it helps you get faster to accelerate to value, and make them really practical. And so a lot of his clients were in the room, and he's just done a really excellent job at that. And then since then, we've struck up a friendship, and he's just a great guy. So he is CEO and founder of Audia, his firm, which is a firm that uses a research-backed process, which I got to see firsthand. He didn't just make all this stuff up. And he helps executives become high-performing leaders. He helps them successfully communicate their vision, energize their teams, and advance organizations toward long-term sustainable success. I'm obviously reading that from his bio. I want to make sure I nail this and get the details right. But this is also something that I love to see in a consultant, is that he also has practitioner experience. So as a businessman, his staff and boards have managed tens of thousands around the globe, directing humanitarian and social service operations. He was, this is not in his bio, I don't think, but somewhere I read also he was high school varsity athlete, and was it 4 or 5 sports, Brian? It was a bunch.
Five in high school. Yeah.
Yeah. And then went on as an athlete in college as well. And so some great leadership, and really looking forward to your thought leadership this morning. Brian, thank you and welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. That athletic background probably laid a really strong foundation for my work in helping to build teams. So that kind of fed in before I even knew it was coming. Yeah,
no doubt, no doubt. Especially being a leader on the team as well, MVP and all that other stuff that you had. You had a long list of accolades there. Well, hey, one thing I mentioned we'll do, it's not directly related to the topic, but I'd like to just get a pulse check on folks. So we're going to do this poll. I think most of y'all know the drill for now, but by now, go to this website. You can't do it through text anymore, so just go to the website either on your phone or your computer. It'll be on the screen also. And we're going to ask you a quick poll, and Brian, you feel free to react. And so here it is. It's these 5 categories. So we're asking, which are you, right? Are you in crisis mode still, fighting kind of daily firefighting? Is that your world? Are you hunkered down where you've made some difficult decisions, kind of batten down the hatches, weathering the storm? Are you pivoting, maybe still in the process of pivoting, emerging out of all of this, or maybe you're in high growth? So those are your 5 choices there. We'll watch the poll real time on the next slide. Populate will take just a minute here. Everybody's emerging now, where the answers are kind of coming in here. So we'll watch it populate real time. So Brian, first on the categories, I don't know that you saw these before. Any thoughts on what you're seeing out there?
I would say, yeah, the way this poll's coming in is great. Is definitely seeing 3 between emerging, crisis, and pivoting. So everybody's kind of in a different kind of, just based on their industry or even where they are geographically and what the government's allowing and things like that. Everybody's trying to find the sweet spot there.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it's funny. When it comes to crisis, on the one hand, my first thought was, well, I'm not really seeing anybody in crisis anymore. But the reality is, there just are, especially in certain industries, there are people who they haven't felt much relief. You know, they're really still living this out. And for some of us, it's hard to imagine because maybe it was a shorter. You know, certainly all of our worlds have changed, but maybe we're not in crisis mode so much anymore right now. Or maybe we should be. Maybe we're just not seeing the alarms blaring on the dashboard, and so we might not feel like we're in crisis, but some people are definitely living it much more acute.
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, you guys probably all agree with this, but it depends just on the nature of that business. I mean, I even had a business, one of my clients, that should be having a boom right now with the very nature of their business, but because of how they have to produce their product, their factory had to be shut down because of sickness and things like that. And so even though the market was ready to buy their product, they couldn't produce it just because of where they were in a hot spot and that kind of thing. So that created a crisis when they should have been doing great.
Yeah, I remember one of the last restaurants, or it was the last restaurant I went to right before kind of the lockdown started, and it was really strange because it was starting, that it was deserted. So it would normally be a booming restaurant. It was pretty empty. But he runs a food and beverage company, and he was talking about, and that might be I know you have a couple of food and beverage clients, so that might be, I don't know if was it a food and beverage client you're thinking of, or you were mentioning, or was it a different kind of factory you're talking about?
No, it was, food production.
Yeah, and so he had a similar challenge, and he's in grocery stores. You'd think he'd be booming, a lot of people cooking for themselves more, and of course, we're seeing grocery stores cleared out. But yeah, it came down to the workers and he was really dealing with that at the time. He was going to a co-packer and leaning on them more. But I said to him, well, how's that going to work? I mean, the co-packers are going to have the same challenges, right? And he said, yeah, but it diversifies. It increases our odds of being able to get product to market. But even early on, that was on his radar, how to get product to market.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. All right, cool. Well, let's thank you all for responding. We see those coming in. So we have hunkered down and high growth, and then we have a bunch emerging. And I think emerging is the overall sentiment. Of course, we see in the news, and just if you were to take a broad brush generalization, of course, we're opening up markets again. And so, I mean, that makes more sense. By the way, Brian, emerging wasn't on the first few iterations of this, and then we added it. It made sense.
Yeah, you had to add it.
I'll also say real quickly, we're dealing with, we have several entrepreneurs here. So we
Great.
tend to be more optimistic than the rest of the world, right? Because we have to be, right? To push through everything we push through. All right, well, let's go on. Oops, I hit the wrong button here. So I'm gonna quit sharing for a minute here, and let's talk a little about the topic. So as we're talking about employee engagement, so Brian, I love your thoughts on just what you're seeing out there. Especially, is it the same old fundamentals are holding true, or is it all these new things about working from home and you're dealing with Zoom, and or is it kind of a mix of both? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I'm seeing a mixed bag, and Ryan, you and I kind of even talked about that, at the end of last week. But I would say this: if there's 2 points to have maybe some conversation around today, it's number one, whether COVID is a part of the conversation currently or not, just the importance of employee engagement, both within the companies that we run or are building, or those we serve or work with out in the marketplace, number one, and why it's so important to keep your hand on that pulse. And number two, that COVID is really just a multiplier. Ryan and I were looking at some research last week that was showing from one entity how COVID had been really good for engagement. And in other places, it's been terrible. And the reason is because it's just adding pressure to what already exists. And so those companies or those organizations that were doing a good job of in the fundamentals, they're seeing tremendous response by their employees in a time of crisis, and that's really galvanizing companies and organizations and is driving engagement. Whereas on the other side, companies who are doing a terrible job that need to go ask their employees to give more, or they're having to cut back, and people are becoming disgruntled. And you guys have seen on the news where, everybody from Amazon to Whole Foods is, going on strike. So there's certainly organizations out there that are doing great jobs and some that aren't.
Brian, some of the positive, I'm curious real quick, do you have some examples either from your clients or even just things you've read and have caught your attention? Let's hear some of the good news, okay?
Yeah.
The bad news. What are some of those examples? That's crazy to see that, isn't it?
Well, I'll give you one example I was thinking about the other day, and it was just so encouraging to hear this. So a client I'd worked with for an extended time, almost 2 years. And it's kind of funny because typically when we go in to do our work with a client, it's going to last maybe 6 to 9 months is typical. Probably 90% of the work we do, we're done in 8 months to get organizations set up, whether they're doing a reset or whether it's kind of they're already healthy and they want to take it to the next level and want to systemize things for growth. So it's very, very rare that we have to work longer than 6 to 9 months with a client. This particular client was just a disaster when I went in. You talk about, it was like triage. It was a horrible culture, terrible engagement, terrible employee satisfaction. The absolute, are you guys familiar with the Net Promoter Score methodology? Yeah. Okay, so we use a modified employee net promoter score, and I'll talk about that tool later if you guys are interested in using it yourself. But we track what their net promoter score is amongst their employees in regard to working there, not recommending the place as a place to do business with, but actually working there. And her score was minus 27. minus 27. That's
Well,
how
keep
bad
in
it
mind, they give the guys the scale. For those who don't know, the scale is negative 100 to 100. So 0 is like a 50. It's kind of right down the middle, right? So they
Oh,
were.
it's horrible. And it's
What?
almost impossible.
But look, even Nike on an net promoter, the top performers are at like 40 or 50. So negative 20 is terrible. Don't get me. I totally agree with you. But I'm just trying to give some perspective.
If you were doing the Net Promoter Score, judging it on customers recommending your business, 60 is to Ryan's point, is a fantastic score. However, the way we're using it is not actually recommending the business; it's recommending it as a place to work. And so it's very rare that you would go below 10.
Yeah.
So to see something in the single digits is just extremely rare. And to go down to minus 27 is just a disaster. So anyway, that's where we started, okay? It was so bad. It was just horrible. I think her employee engagement scores were like 6, 10, and 12 the first times we did it. So, I mean, just a terrible situation. So they were a global consulting company, probably 200, 250 employees and contractors they used around the world, and just terrible. So she sends me an email the other day, and she was talking about how their whole business has been disrupted during this COVID, and she said, but I just needed to send you a note to let you know what's happening over here. The employees have completely rallied. I've got emails from multiple people. She forwarded me one from one of the biggest detractors when I went in there that I thought the lady wouldn't even make it. And it was the lady saying, I don't care if you have to cut my pay another 20%, do it before you let anybody go, because I'm so committed to this team. I know we're going to come out of this and we're going to be stronger, and I don't want to lose anybody. And she said, if we hadn't done the hard work to work on engagement, and if I hadn't stayed focused on it, this whole thing blown up. I probably would have lost my business, but everybody's rallying around us now, and we're coming up with new ideas, and it was just so encouraging to see that, because
that's awesome.
I mean, it was a shipwreck when I went in there, and now they're doing great because they put these principles into play.
Sounds like you can't say enough bad about it when you got there. But hey, I'm sure you're going to list these off in the. Of course, everybody's wondering, well, how, right? Can you boil it down? And I know you did a bunch of stuff, so I know it's hard to boil it down to just one thing. But can you boil it down to a sentence or two? These are the main places where we focused and see that kind of change.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ron and I were talking initially about, what could we poll on, and one of the ideas initially was just throwing this out to you guys to say, hey, here's some important things that drive employee engagement. And really there's about 8 things that are the major things that drive engagement. I'll kind of run through those for you here in a second. But number one by far is the why. So if you guys have ever heard of Simon Sinek and you've read his book, Start With Why, he really sums it up on why it's so important. If you're a human being, and I don't care what culture you come from, I don't care what industry you're in, this is backed up by research all over the globe. Gallup's done a tremendous job in this, of course, if you want to do some research on that later. But having life-giving work is just absolutely the most important thing that drives engagement. And I want to talk about that for a second, because it's a built-in strategy. If the purpose of your organization, and I don't care whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, a mix, whatever, if the purpose of your organization is highly motivating to the individuals that work there, that one thing more than anything else will lead to success. The research shows over and over and over again that when you have highly engaged employees, primarily driven by the purpose of their organization, over time, they will always outperform the markets and their competition. And the reason for that really is 4 things. you know, we've all heard the statement that there's no such thing as a silver bullet. Well, I would argue that high levels of employee engagement is the silver bullet. And the reason is because it's a built-in natural innovation strategy. It's a built-in natural adaptability strategy. It's a built-in natural discipline strategy. It's a built-in natural accountability strategy. And so if you've got high levels of engagement throughout your organization, people take care of their own crap. They give far more of themselves than they ever would if they weren't motivated. And it's something that lasts. So no matter what's thrown at your business, and it's kind of like the idea of, you know, what starts first? Would you rather have a great vision to begin with, or would you rather have a highly cohesive leadership team? Well, growing up, I would have always said vision, and even when I first got into business. But later, I've come to learn the truth, and Patrick Lencioni teaches this as well, that no, the most important thing is the cohesive leadership team, because if you've got a leadership team that's really out to serve one another and to achieve something great together, they'll come up with the right vision and strategy. You can have the right vision and strategy first and not be able to execute it because low engagement and a terrible culture. And so I think that is the silver bullet, because no matter what's thrown at your business, you'll overcome it. It's kind of like that great quote from Jurassic Park: life will find a way. So that's how I feel about engagement. So number one, definitely the most important in every survey and all research is the why, the purpose, the fact that people want to give themselves to something greater than themselves. It's just how we're naturally wired.
Yeah, that's great. And Brian, I think when you talked about a healthy culture, I don't remember all the terms you used, but you said something like that does process improvement, does excellent. They figure all this stuff out, and it just sort of is this machine happening on its own. That's my raising back. I think the same way around customer experience. Of course, that's where kind of our areas of passion overlap some, where you have culture can impact the customer experience, of course. And I always think of it as, let's say you had a list of things in the company you wanted to go improve. You have 10 things on the list, 20, 30, whatever the number is. Culture will find, you had maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. Culture will find 3B and 3C and the others that weren't even on your list, and they'll just take care of them before you even have to go try to fix it, right? It's just this.
That's right.
Yeah, it's really cool to see happen. Well, great. All right, thanks for sharing that perspective. Let's go to the poll. We'll keep talking as we do this, but let's ask folks what they're seeing, if we talked about. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll let these start rolling in. So y'all can see my screen there, same place. And just what are y'all seeing out there compared to pre-COVID-19? Are you seeing your culture, or in some cases, maybe one of your clients' cultures? Pick a culture you want to answer for here. Is it better? Is it worse? Funny, by the way, Brian, can you see this? I actually haven't used this. You can?
Hey, can I ask a question of Brian?
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie. Hey, Charlie.
Yeah, Brian, I was wondering, you said people want to give themselves to something greater than themselves, which I agree with. But so my question, I guess, is around, is it easier to capture people on a vision like this, something greater than themselves, as they're younger or as they're older? How does that scale work?
You know, man, that is a great question, and I bet I've fielded 2,500 questions in workshops and seminars. Never been asked that one. That's a great one. I'll give you my off the cuff answer to that. I don't think it matters, frankly, because we're just all humans, and I've worked all over the world, literally, and I've seen people respond in every single culture, and I've never noticed an age difference. Although I will say this now, the millennials seem to be more sensitive to this, and maybe that's just kind of an American cultural, at least I'm talking about American millennials, maybe that's more of an American cultural phenomena of the last 15 or 20 years where, you know, we're having the transition really from the boomer generation through X and down to the millennials. And so they seem to be, the millennials seem to be much more less apt to put up with systematic nonsense that's not going somewhere. And so I think that's why some of your research you're seeing now is they don't care about a career. They're not looking for a company, right, that's going to take care of them. They want to go do something that's going to matter.
Yeah, but you know, I'm wondering now though, is that true that we as somebody who's older, we categorize these people called millennials, okay? But the fact of the matter is they're just young.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So as we get the reason this came to mind is because I looked at I'm looking over my career, and I think about where I was when I was younger. So as you get older, you get married. Okay.
Yeah.
There's something greater than yourself there. You have kids. There's something much greater than yourself there.
Yeah.
Okay. You have older parents that you have to take care of. Again, so what happens is as we get older, our life becomes richer, if you will, right? With more important relationships that actually provide us with something greater than ourselves.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've heard so many people that, you know, you get them in their 50s and you say, I've coached so many people, and you say, you know, we really want to get to this why and what, and they're like, oh, no, it's not important. What's important, man, is that the business makes money. Okay. We need to just provide a good, because you get to lose that idealism, if you will, because it's built somewhere else. Okay. So I'd just say, maybe be alert to that, you know, that age demographic in this, you know, because we do change as we grow older.
Well, let me say real quick, Brian, before you respond, I'll say just from doing change management and managing stakeholders, I've definitely observed that the folks who are the strongest curmudgeons at the beginning, not necessarily age oriented, but let's use a stereotype and what you're talking about, Charlie, people who maybe become a little jaded. Those folks are your biggest champions once you win them over. They're just slower to jump on board in a lot of cases. They're more skeptical, right? And so anyway, I wonder how that relates to what you've seen too. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, that's more my experience is change management is, it just depends. It's also natural wiring. So I think what Charlie was saying earlier is dead on. You know, we try to lump all the people, millennials, and they're all just wired different, and they come from different backgrounds. And so I would say the whole age spectrum is just like that. I've seen tremendous response from, you know, call it the older crowd too. All those things that you're talking about that are important to individuals, that's all part of it too. That's part of their why, personal why. So when the organizational why lines up with the personal why, you know, that's when we look for significant growth and success in this. The only place I would push back a little bit there, maybe, Charlie, is that the only important thing is the business makes money. I would say that in what I've seen, that is the sure death knell to making money the most important thing. This is where I would say Friedman was dead wrong when he said that the purpose of business is to create value for the shareholder. I think all the research now shows that if the purpose of the business is to change the world, ultimately you end up making money too. And so it's really a drag on engagement when you make compensation or money the most important thing. As a matter of fact, the research shows that that's the 8th most important driver at less than 10% over time. Now, sometimes it's incredibly critical in the short run. So I don't want to downplay it. And it is one of the top 8 drivers, but it's the least of those.
Yeah, that's great, Brian. And I'm sure you've seen too, cultures where that is their top driver in that culture. And so you get people that do just what is required of them. Maybe they're not very forthcoming. They're not really they're not pursuing excellence. And so, you know, you have that standard that's been set. And that's very difficult to change. I remember one that just came to mind, a client. In fact, Jim, you and I shared the same client, and that culture is, you know, who I'm referring to here.
Oh, yes, I remember it well.
They had to teach their employees just to celebrate birthdays. I mean, they had become so robotic. They had a culture that was very big brother, making sure they were always working. And so the CFO of all folks came in to be the fun champion, the CFO, which that usually doesn't compute, right? He actually happened to be a CFO, is very jovial, you know, and he brought that to the company actually. But he said, man, it was really difficult. He had to just completely retrain that culture because they were so ingrained in the private equity back. There's just a lot of focus there before. So, hey, we're coming about 20 minutes left. I think this is the part of the meeting where we like to pass the mic a little bit. And Brian, by all means, continue to participate here, not cutting you off by any means. As we pass the mic around, feel free to share some questions to Brian still, but let me just open it up a little bit. Anybody have, oh, and by the way, I want to point out, we do have some millennials on the round table. Some of them have a little gray in their beard. I see Jonathan raising his hand. I'll go to Jonathan first. Yeah, James also. Yeah, let's start with just again real quickly what you do, a sentence or two, and some comments on employee engagement, what you're seeing out there, and or questions for Brian. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Brian, I have a real estate company here in North Carolina, but my question is in regards to engagement, obviously things are going to be different. They're talking a lot more about employees working from home more. How do you think that the struggles that are going to come with that, with people not physically being in the same space, how is that going to affect engagement? Also, what do you think it's going to impact the commercial real estate market? Because everything that I'm hearing is that the commercial real estate market is going to tank because more people are going to continue working from home. Offices and business are going to be forced to downsize and not carry that overhead anymore.
Yeah.
But also how the employee engagement maintains and grows and builds that culture. Obviously, it's more difficult in a virtual setting when you're not face-to-face, belly-to-belly with people. How do you see all that playing out?
Yeah, great question. So let me run through these because I think let me run through the top 8 drivers, and number 3 deals directly with what you're talking about. So here's by percentage, and this research comes from a BCWI, but the reason I use this one is it's a great encapsulation of all the research that's out there. So number 1, life-giving work is the most important, and this is through millions of surveys at 18% is the highest driver of engagement. Number 2 that goes so close with life-giving work is inspirational leadership. At 17%, leaders that really inspire me to give more and to do more and to be about something bigger. Number 3 is sustainable strategy for the company, and that's at 13.9%. So let me come back to real estate there in a second. Outstanding talent, just seeing that we've got great talent on the team, we could do something here, that's 13.3. Healthy communication, 11.3. If I had to pick a qualm with the research, when I go into work with clients, I always see that that communication is a massive problem and creates all kinds of barriers. Uplifting growth opportunities personally and professionally, that's at 9.8%. I need a growth path in my role with the company. Fantastic teams that I get is 8.3, which is I get to be around people who lift me up, that work well together with me, that we can achieve something together.
Hey, how's that different than great talent, Brian?
Well, the difference is the teams and the talent is, number 1 on the talent is just I can see we've got the raw ingredients.
Okay.
That what we're trying to do here is drawing great talent. Now, we can all look, let's use sports as an analogy. We can all look at teams that had phenomenal talent on the field and were horrible. I mean, for most of us here on this call right now, we're in Dallas. So, see Dallas Cowboys. T.O. is a perfect example.
Right.
Somebody phenomenal talent, but didn't make the team better. And then finally, compensation is last at 8%. And again, this is just what's going to last over time. So back to the sustainable strategy at 13.9 and number 3, I think that's a huge issue. And that's why we're seeing in some of these cases where we've got organizations that have been about the right thing, systematizing this thing, and they're killing it. And their business is sustainable. And then others, you know, it's fear and uncertainty and despair that their business isn't going to make it because the business wouldn't work in a classic social distancing or, you know, that kind of deal. So I think real estate may be an issue.
I have a question for you, Brian.
Okay.
As a millennial, I work for a tech company that's a public company. And, you know, sometimes I grow tired, quite frankly, of hearing the word millennial, just because it's not representative of any sort of spectrum. Age is just a
right. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Baby.
Andrew, you're still an individual. We still love you, Andrew McKinney. Okay, we get it.
So,
Right.
I'll add that the way the generations are defined is actually by technology.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So my question for you, I really liked your NPS call out. How do you see the Simon Sinek approach, the purpose-driven kind of that purpose-driven anthem, if you will, about knowing your why? How has that affected your approach for good and technology companies when you're doing change management campaigns or organizational optimization or whatever, you know, whatever you're focused on with that specific client you're engaging with?
Yeah, love it. Listen, love it. So kind of a fundamental here is that we build the right system and we let the system take care of 95% of the problem. And then we don't have to play whack-a-mole with every single individual thing that pops up. So we use the same process to help companies create this and then systemize it based on whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. And so it doesn't really matter what the industry or sector or whatever is or age of the employees. We use the same system and frankly, it works every time. I mean, it's probably the number one most thing we would be proud of is we have a 100% success rate. So I'll give you an example of one tech company we just went and worked with over the past year, and they asked me, you know, how are we going to solve for the complexity of the technical worker we have? And I said, we're not going to solve for any complexity there. We're going to use the system because I don't care how they're wired, they're still human beings. And once we get into this process, what's important to them will come out and then we'll align behind that. And so that's kind of how we do that. So, you know, back to kind of what Charlie was saying earlier, he makes some good points there. And we've seen that, you know, you definitely have different approaches, whether it's tech, or whether it's age, whether it's culture, whatever. People come at it from a different angle, but ultimately they all arrive at the same place.
Hey, we have about 10 minutes left. I'd love to hear from anybody else about maybe one more we can fit in about what you're seeing out there. I did point out on the poll, you saw it come up, but everybody on this roundtable said that things have gotten better. So none of us are seeing that toxic culture. We know it's out there, it's happening. This roundtable isn't experiencing it. So that's kind of interesting.
I have a question here, Ron. Yeah, no, Brian, this is really interesting. It's great stuff and much appreciated. I just helped a client last week with their they reopened their office yesterday, and some of the issues, especially with younger staff, about reluctance to come to the office, having to embrace and address all the sensitivities around this. In this case, the client is very fortunate in that they've got about 30 people, but the space actually can hold 120, so they can have massive social distancing, and it all works out fine. But even so, that it's had to be approached with a lot of sensitivity.
Right.
But my question is actually about the definition of culture and your thoughts on how will we be able to maintain culture as work become more and more distributed? I mean, more and more people are going to be working from home. I was talking to a buddy over the weekend who's a partner with one of the big management consultancies, and he's received word that he's only going back to the office to get his stuff. Basically, going forward, they're going to be compressing their office space, and cheaper to break the lease than to keep going there. Very expensive city, and so that you just see that more across the board. It's going to be increasingly an issue. In which case, this is what we were talking about. Well, being in an office made a big difference. The mentorship, the people you were working with, like to your point about working teams and the ability to learn and so forth. This is, obviously going to be, how do you create a culture and maintain a culture in that kind of environment and just distributed environment?
Yeah, awesome question. So I'll go back to engagement. So let me be real clear here, and I think this is a key point. And we talk about this kind of in our workshops that we do that Ryan attended, is that culture and employee engagement are not the same thing, okay? They're two separate things. Now, they're very closely related, but what do you want if you can only choose one? Do you want a great culture or do you want high engagement? And the answer, just to cut to the chase because of time, is definitely engagement. So high engagement will always create a great culture. A great culture without high engagement can go away fast, okay? So here's what I would say on that is just going back to the systematic approach. If you're doing all the right things to drive engagement, then highly engaged employees, whether they're in the office every day or whether they travel on a constant basis or whether you're just going to be connected by technology, they will figure out how to keep that culture going and what adjustments need to be made. It's a built-in strategy. Think about it with your family. COVID hits and you may see your family less or whatever, but you don't care about them less. You still find ways to do things with them. And you find a way to serve one another and support one another when you need it. And so that's a huge piece of it. Another thing that I'll say, and this is really a critical point when I talk about systemization of your culture and engagement, is creating a reward and celebration system to support the behavior that you're looking for. Okay, so when we go in and work with a company, listen, one thing I cannot stand is the wordsmith values exercises in work. It makes me want to throw up. Okay, I'll go to sleep in 2 minutes. And I drink a lot of coffee. So we don't like doing that kind of stuff that traditionally we as consultants have done in the past, because it doesn't lead to anything that's real and authentic and they're using on a daily basis. So what we want to do is teach them, okay, what is core that we couldn't take away even if we wanted to, and what is aspirational? What do you wish were true as core that's not quite there? And this applies to your culture too. Then let's establish that with clarity. And now let's set up a reward and celebration system that rewards the behaviors that we're looking for that support what it is we're trying to do, okay? And so that's how you move from something that's core to something that's aspirational, and make any adjustments that I need to make in the culture, whether I'm with you or not. Because here's the key principle, and I'll just stop with this, is you become what you celebrate. And so if you've got to make some changes because everybody's virtual, well, set up the system so that you celebrate the activities that you're looking for when everybody's virtual, and you'll become that, or you'll strengthen that.
That was awesome, Brian. You gave us several tweetable key takeaways there. Really awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap us up, but listen, it seems like some of y'all might want to continue the dialogue. So just let me know. I'll be glad to put you in touch. I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to wrap this a little early. I'm going to ask you to stay on for just a minute because I'm going to stop the recording and have a
just
quick
add one thing, no, Brian.
Charlie.
Yep.
Yeah, and Brian, I just want to, I'm listening to what you're saying, okay? And what I heard you say to Jim's question, which I think is a very, very important question. Okay, we've got a new employee base that's going to be separated here. Okay, it's not going to be together like we used to be on site, and which is Jonathan's concern. And then you've got now you're going to have a larger percentage as a distributed workforce. And I would just say that the answer you gave, which said that says, oh yeah, it's still going to be the same, and use family as an example, which I think is not a good example. Okay,
Sure.
I think friends would be a better example. Okay, in that regard, because family's family. All right, you can never escape that one. But I would just challenge you to say, and anybody that's doing this, is that it is going to be different. I think employee engagement is going to be very different. And I don't think we have the answers yet, but I think that you have a tremendous opportunity to take all from, being in one place, okay, and saying in a distributed market, how do these 8 things sort of work, and where do we now need to place more emphasis, okay, in order to keep the distributed workforce together and engaged.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think since we're cutting off here, I'll just say, Brian and I did have a healthy debate about this beforehand, and totally agree with your point, Charlie, that the details will be different. I know Brian agrees too, but the fundamentals will remain. And that's his point. So let's not misconstrue that, like, employee engagement is not going to go away from the top of the list.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's going away, but I'm to get the lady from a -27 in a distributed workforce is going to be different than in a centralized workforce. It may be different, the methods and systems you use. That's all.
That's right. That's the point Ron was making. That's exactly right. I agree, Charlie. I was just talking about the fundamental.
I'd be interested in, that'd be a great follow-up call to say, so what did you learn 6 months later?
Yeah, the specific, like the details of things, even just like rules on what to do in a Zoom, all the little tactics and things that we would have never thought about. Well, let me wrap this. Hey, I just want to thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody. I'm just going to stop the recording and